Welcome everyone, and I'm Natalie Minkin, even though it says I'm Dan Minkin. I'm the co-founder of NZBCA, and Dan is at the airport on his way to Wellington, so I'm introducing this webinar today. So the webinar, as usual, is being recorded, and we will have a link for you to view it, and anyone else that needs to after the session. So the webinar will be followed by question and answers at the end, if you have any questions or answers. And our webinar number 5 is on the Insider's Guide to Procurement, an introduction presented by Jo Toon. So Jo has over 13 years of experience. Sorry, I'm just admitting people while I'm trying to talk. She has 13 years experience as a New Zealand government procurement specialist before striking out on her own to help businesses like you navigate the competitive procurement process. In this webinar, she will give you an outline of the processes, the key steps to take when bidding, and some hints and tips on how to avoid the many common pitfalls and mistakes that could trip you up along the way. So those of you that have just joined, I'm Natalie Minkin, co-founder of the NZBCA. Dan is down at the airport heading to Wellington, and it's over to you now. Thank you, Jo.
Kia ora, Natalie, and kia ora koutou. Lovely to see you all this wet, windy, rainy day in New Zealand. So lovely to be here. As Natalie said, I'm a ex-government procurement specialist, so 13.5 years as a government buyer across multiple central government agencies. Before that, I worked in the UK on the bid side, so responding to RFTs, RFQs, ROIs, every letter of the alphabet soup. And that's given me an insight into both the procurement side and the supplier side. And last year, I set myself up in business because I want to support particularly small and medium businesses as they try to navigate the competitive procurement process. So this session is going to be a very brief taster of government procurement. It's obviously a complex topic that can't be covered in just one webinar. But what I'm going to cover off is a little bit about what procurement actually is, how it works in the New Zealand government context specifically. Whilst there are very similar elements for the private procurement side, government procurement has very specific rules that they need to follow, and I want to make sure that you're aware of how those can impact you when you're bidding for work. I'm going to give a little bit about the government electronic tender service, so how to actually access those opportunities, and finally, most importantly, what to expect if you have a request come through and some tips on responding. We'll have some time for questions at the end. So first up, what is procurement? It's a long word, it's challenging to pronounce, it's even harder to spell. So overall, procurement is the process of locating, agreeing to terms and purchasing goods, services or other works from an external source. What that means is that anything an organisation can't create or deliver in-house is bought through a procurement process. Simple. Can be buying catering for a training event, or as complex as building and furnishing the new facility for our archives. I got to sit opposite that for a good year and it was great fun watching that go up. When the process is being run through a government department, there are formal procedures that need to be followed, and in New Zealand, these are covered by the government procurement rules. It's also important to note that in every industry, there are going to be people and organisations who run processes in different ways. So while the government procurement rules apply across government, they may be interpreted and put into practice slightly differently in each agency. So I get asked, why does it have to be this complicated? Why are there all these hurdles when I just want to sell my services or my goods to government? I know I'm the best organisation for the job. Why can't I just get the contract? I also get asked this internally when I was in procurement. Why are there all these hurdles when I know exactly who I want to buy from? So New Zealand government spends about $51.5 billion a year on external goods and services. That's approximately 20% of our GDP. So it comes from taxpayers' dollars, and there's a public interest in us spending that money well, getting the right outcomes, and improving lives for everybody in New Zealand. And additionally, each government agency has a fixed budget. They need to make sure that money isn't being wasted. So government agencies are supposed to try and tailor the complexity of the process to the dollar value of the end contract. There is no point in a process costing more than the contract's worth. But there is a duty to ensure that suppliers are capable of doing what they say they can and that they're able to meet the needs of the agency. And there's an additional layer of bureaucracy. It's a pain. Within government departments, they have financial delegations, which is the amount that an individual can sign a contract for. Just because a manager has a budget of $200,000 doesn't necessarily mean they can sign a contract for $200,000. So as well as the person making the decision about the contract, there may be a higher level manager who has to authorise and enter into that contract. And all of this needs a paper trail. So we have the Public Records Act, we have the Official Information Act. This adds layers of bureaucracy that you might not necessarily see in a private sector procurement process. I've mentioned the government procurement rules a couple of times. I'm just going to give you a brief outline of what they are. Please be aware that the rules are currently undergoing a refresh. Consultation closes in about 4 hours. So there are a few changes on the horizon. So these rules outline the processes that need to be followed when running a procurement process. And there are different expectations on different types of government agency. There is more detail about this on the New Zealand procurement website, but essentially the more central an agency is, if it's a ministry, if it's like the Department of Conservation, they have to follow the rules. But as you get further out, it becomes more flexible and you get out to local government. And whilst they're encouraged to follow the rules, they don't have to. So they get a bit more flexibility. The rules outline the best practice that government agencies should comply with when planning and running a process. If you're joining us from outside of New Zealand, in New Zealand, the rules are not legally binding, so they are best practice guidelines. If you're running or entering into procurement processes in Europe, the UK, for example, they actually have legislation behind it. Some of the rules stem from our trade treaties with other countries. So the most notable of the rules is the dollar threshold that means an agency must openly advertise for goods or services, and anybody, no matter whether they're New Zealand based or around the world, can bid for them. This is set at $100,000 for goods, services, refurbishments, and $9 million for a new construction. It's important to note that these are whole of life costs. So any extension, scope changes, renewal. So if it's a 4-year contract only worth $25,000 a year, that has to be openly advertised because in total it's $100,000. Other elements in the rules include aspects like the minimum time frame open procurement processes need to be open for. And this is actually one of the things that's going to be changing in the government rules. Great for us. Everybody should be getting slightly longer to respond. There's information about what agencies must tell you when they are advertising a procurement process. The fact that they must give you feedback. This is really critical because people don't necessarily ask and agencies don't necessarily offer. They are required to tell you if you've been successful or if you've not been successful. They're required to tell you why and give you opportunities for improvement. The rules also cover the circumstances in which an agency doesn't have to openly advertise. And it includes where and how to advertise the opportunity, how they must evaluate, and many, many more. You can look up the rules themselves. I've given you the link here, but if you just Google New Zealand Government Procurement Rules, it comes up as well. So you're openly advertising. Where to find these opportunities. And the Government Electronic Tender Service is the central place for agencies to advertise a opportunity. So it's really important that you know that GETS exists, that you sign up. This requires a RealMe profile. It doesn't have to be verified. So you can create a sign-in for a centralized mailbox, so sales at your company name, and that means more people can access opportunities. Once you've signed up, set yourself up for notifications using procurement codes, because this automatically emails you when opportunities you may be interested in are advertised. When an opportunity is available, you can see the basic information like this without logging in. But to get details, to download documents, get updates, you must log in and register an interest. This doesn't commit you to submitting a bid, but it means that you can get the information. Once you've signed up and registered, you then get to see these documents, you get to see the questions, and further down the page, the facility to upload the response. Not all agencies use the upload, but this is becoming more prevalent nowadays. You also need to look out for things like notices of intent, requests for information, forward planning opportunities. These are they're not specifically processes in and of themselves. A request for information is a market intelligence gathering exercise. So agencies might be interested in what is going on in the market. Notice of intent and forward planning opportunities are indicators that an agency is planning to run a process. But do sign up and check these carefully. Just occasionally, an agency will advertise a notice of intent or request for information when it's actually a procurement process hiding underneath. So if it's something that you're interested in, check the document, review it carefully, make sure you're subscribed for updates. You don't want to miss out because somebody's made a mistake. Not all processes are openly advertised. So you do need to be aware of this. They might not be on GETS for multiple reasons. The first key one is if it's under the thresholds. They don't have to openly advertise if it's below $100,000. Generally, an agency's procurement policies will require a level of closed competition, so 3 quotes, 5 quotes. If it's under 100,000 and above a threshold, that might be above 25,000, it might be above 5,000. You can check procurement policies on government websites, and this is another change that's coming in with the update to the rules, that agencies are going to have to make those policies publicly available. If it's under $100,000, a closed procurement process just means they're still running a process, they're still going to check value, they're still going to check that you can meet their needs, but it's a limited number of suppliers. So not everybody can put their hat in the ring. If your services, so now we're all on this boutique space, so you're likely to be sitting under that 100,000 threshold. It's worth getting in touch with agencies that you're interested in working with, making sure that they know that you exist, they know what you can do, and this is just part of your regular sales and marketing process. If the services are on an all of government or a common capability contract, they don't have to be openly advertised, as agencies can go directly to them. And similarly, if it's a syndicated agreement. There are currently 21 all of government contracts, including one great big one for consultancy, as well as slightly smaller consultancy such as design, legal, procurement's on there, banking, etc., etc. These are openly advertised contracts when they're being set up, but it means that agencies don't have to openly go when they are buying from that panel. If you have services that fall under an all-of-government agreement, go check it out. Check out that link that I've put on there, which takes you to all of these contracts. Look for the expiry date, make sure that you're signed up with Get so that you can see when it's next being advertised. The generalised consultancy one might not be being advertised for another couple of years. They are currently going through a major strategic review of it, so just keep an eye out for that. They might have an exemption or opt-out. The rules allow for things like if there's only one supplier. This is the one that's most used. So if there's only one organisation that can deliver these services, then they can get sign-off to say they don't have to put everybody through the barriers of responding to a procurement process when there's only going to be one response, only one organisation that's capable of delivery. And finally, if an agency isn't mandated under the rules, so for example, if they are a local authority, a local council, they might not openly advertise, although it's fair to say that from the procurement policies I've seen on councils' websites, most of them do require openly advertising. It's worth checking out their policies and see what their approaches are. Now, if an agency isn't mandated to use the Government Electronic Tender Service, they may use alternative portals. So you do need to check particularly local councils and see where they're going to be advertising. The most commonly used is TenderLink. I've given you the main link here, but each local council has their own link into it. The big picture TenderLink is a subscription-based model, but if you go through each council site, then it's free to sign up. The wider benefits of signing up for TenderLink are that you get to see private sector bids and you get to see across Australasia. That's a marketing and sales decision for you. The Defence Force uses a system called Smart Procure. They still advertise through GETS, but if you're thinking of targeting the Defence Force, it's worth signing up to Smart Procure early, just so you've got that hurdle out of the way and saving time when a procurement is released. And I want to be really clear that you need to exercise caution if you're asked to pay to access any New Zealand government RFP through a third-party portal. All advertising should be free. And whilst aggregator services can be helpful to avoid getting multiple notices from lots of different areas, they are not necessary. And if price and your own cash flow is critical to you, then you might want to take the slightly longer route of signing up to multiple instances. So now looking at what goes into a notice of procurement. These tend to be fairly standard. They won't necessarily all be in the same order, although the majority of agencies will use standard templates. So once you're familiar with those templates in the outline, you'll know where to go to look for information. Again, I've put the link to the New Zealand procurement template page, so you can actually go and have a dive and a nosy into the information. So first up, what's in there? What the agency's buying. What do they actually want? What are the outcomes they are looking for? And that's really critical. If you can't deliver what they're looking for, there's no point in going further. They will include the timetable. So when are the key deadlines? Things like the questions deadline, when any briefings or site visits are happening, and most importantly, when the RFP response is due. You check that and make sure that you've got those deadlines in your calendar as soon as possible. It will include the requirements for how documents are to be submitted, particularly if they're using portals other than GETS. They'll give you the format of the documents, they'll give you any word count limits, any requirements about appendices or attachments. Again, pay attention to these. If you don't comply with this, you can get thrown out. It'll tell you how the response is going to be evaluated. So that will include the weightings, the relative importance of each section and each set of questions, as well as the 0 to 10 scale of how they're going to evaluate each question. It will include the terms and conditions of bidding. These tend to be very standard, and they're effectively how you and the agency behave during the procurement process, and elements around confidentiality of your information, but also recognising and allowing for things like the Official Information Act. Worth having a read through to understand what's included, but these tend to be standard across all government procurement processes. They'll include the response documents, so what you actually need to fill in, any templates that you are required to follow. Will include the information about the pricing and how you complete that response, particularly if it's all pricing information is being kept separate, or if you're including it in the main body of your response. So follow those instructions really carefully. And finally, it will include the contract or draft contract that they will expect you to sign up to if you are successful and you have an opportunity to raise any issues with that contract as part of your response. So when you first get access to a procurement document, it can be really tempting to dive into writing the response. After all, the clock's ticking, you have a limited time period to do a lot of work. But it's crucial that you take on board some form of go, no-go decision making to decide whether the opportunity is worth your time. It's expensive. You can spend days and weeks on this, and that's time that you're not spending on the rest of your business. And you've got investment in bid writers, legal advice, traveling for site visits. You want to make sure that you're spending that money on opportunities you can win. I do have a whole workshop on this topic, so we're not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but at a high level, the elements you should be considering are, can we deliver the response, the bid itself, and the services or goods that are required to fulfill the contract? Can we compete? Do you know who you're going to be up against, what their unique success factors, what your unique success factors are? How well are you positioned to win? And most importantly, can you make a profit? There is no point in going for government contracts if it's going to make you lose money and eventually go bust. So all three areas need to be understood. And if any of these areas become a no, you need to carefully consider whether you should spend the time on a response. Because if you can deliver and compete but can't make a profit, you're going to be unsustainable. If you can deliver and make a profit, but somebody else is a better fit, you're not going to be competitive. And if you can compete and make a profit but can't actually deliver, then either the bid or the goods and services, you're going to be unsuccessful. And you particularly don't want the reputational risk of being unsuccessful in delivering the contract. That can easily lock you out from any future government contracts. But if you can deliver, if you can compete, and you can make a profit, then go for it. So you've got your response in front of you, you're going to go for it. You really need to plan early for the response. Even if you don't have the capacity to actively work on it when it first lands on your desk, take the time to work out your timeframes, spot any areas which are going to be more complex and that are going to need more focus. Don't leave things to the last minute. So if you get an advance notice, if you get a forward planning opportunity that gives you the heads up, use this to your advantage. Get as much information as possible to block time in your diary. Scout out any partnership opportunities. This process can be as short or as long as you need. For a simple RFP, it might only take you a couple of hours. For something that's more complex, you could need a day or so just to plan, particularly if you need to read through a long set of requirements. So overall, always assume it takes longer than you think. Please. This is particularly important if you've already got a full calendar of work over the response period. You might end up working in the evenings and weekends. And if you're reliant on other people to do stuff for you, then you've got to work with their timeframes as well. I've talked about in the go, no, go decision making. Make sure it's something that you can deliver. Review the requirements. Be comfortable that it's a good match with what you can do and be realistic. And if you don't have the full skills or experience needed, is there ability to partner with somebody else? You need to be able to give the agency the confidence that you and any partners involved can deliver. And partnership takes time. Allow for that time in your response as well. Review your timetable. Look for any key dates and deadlines. Do you have to do pre-registration? Do you have to go to a briefing? Is there a Q&A session or a site visit? Get those key dates into your diary as soon as possible. Make sure you know when the questions period closes. Check those submission requirements. How do they want the response submitted? If you've got to use another portal such as Tenderlink, Cottis, Bravo Solution, get registered for that as soon as possible. Make sure you know what's important to the agency. Read through the questions, their weightings. Any area which has got a high weighting, expect to spend proportionally more time on that. And plan, lock in that time for when you're going to write the response. Make sure you know who's going to be doing which elements of the response, particularly if you're working with other people. And allow time for reviewing, for proofreading before the deadline. Please don't submit something with things like Michael to complete. I have seen that. It doesn't do you any favors. And allow for any changes that might come up as a result of questions you've asked or that other bidders have asked. And once you've done your planning, you've got your key dates locked in, you know when you're going to be tackling the different sections, it's time to get down to work. So I'm going to be looking here at a few tips which have come from frustrations and mistakes that I've seen suppliers making. And it's really just soul destroying when you know you've got somebody who's really good, but they're making silly mistakes, because overall scoring a response is a numbers game. And the difference between the first and last supplier can be as little as 10 marks. So getting these elements right makes a significant difference to your chances of winning. First up, don't assume knowledge on the part of the agency, even if they've worked with you before. Government departments are large, unwieldy beasts, and it's entirely possible that the people who are scoring your response have not been those you've worked with previously. Make sure if you want them to evaluate something, it has to be in the bid. Please complete the answers in full. Don't cross-refer to a website or to external information unless the RFP explicitly asks you to. You want to make it as easy as possible for the evaluators to assess and score your response. And your response is part of the official record of the procurement process. So information assessed has to be in there. We all know a website can change significantly over the course of a single day. Please answer the question that is in front of you. All too often we see people who've answered the questions that they would like to have been asked, or they only answer part of the question. I once had a 2-line answer to a question that had about 6 subparts to it. You can imagine how that person scored. You've got one opportunity to showcase your organisation in an RFP process. And if you get 0 out of 10 for a section that's worth 10% of the marks, you can't make that up elsewhere in the response. Take a note of the pricing approach. Pricing can be weighted, which means that prices are compared across responses and a formula is taken to compare and score lowest to highest price. And this is mostly used if it's really easy to compare offerings, so furniture, stationery, where the price is the key criteria. But a lot of the times, price is unweighted. It doesn't mean price is not important. It allows for more flexibility and for the evaluators to compare, is a higher price worth the higher score that has been given to it, or is the 10% extra actually not worth the $100,000 more that the highest bid place supplier has asked for. So be aware of what that means and how you're going to price. Ask questions. early and often. You need to make as few assumptions as possible. It's also worth reviewing the questions and answers that other people have asked. They might be considering elements that you haven't. And please don't leave asking your questions to the deadline. If the response from the agency raises further questions, or if they've misinterpreted your question and don't answer it properly, you won't have the ability to ask again. If you ask it early, you can come back with a follow-up question. And finally, please review and proofread. Proofread your written response, proof your financials. Make sure that you don't have silly errors. You might not get marked down for having the wrong agency name in the response or typos, but it doesn't help your professionalism, and it's really going to count against you if you're bidding for something that is around proofreading or design work. If there are formula in your spreadsheet for pricing, then work it out manually as well. Make sure that there aren't any errors in that formula. You may be able to resubmit a price if you find an error after.
Oops, it's frozen. Give her a minute to come back.
Cool.
You froze there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Okay. How far did you get through with the last bit?
I think it was the most of it. I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
That's good. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for that. So just a little bit about the evaluation process. In the background, the team of evaluators are reading and scoring your responses. They will do that individually first, and that in and of itself can take days or weeks depending on the number of responses. They can be, for an open process, there could be up to 50, 80, hundreds of them. Then once they've done their individual scoring, they will get together to moderate their responses. They will discuss their individual scores, their reasons for that scoring, and then agree on a final score for each response. And then the responses are ranked, and either a final decision's made about who's won or a shortlisting agreed on. Everything then has to be written up and approved before respondents are contacted. Another part of that wonderful bureaucracy I talked about at the beginning. So if things have gone quiet, don't panic. But once they've made their decision and they've got their approvals, then you'll receive either an email or a phone call to let you know about the outcome. And if there's a second stage, like a presentation, you're given information about this process. No matter whether or not you've been successful or unsuccessful, please ask for feedback. It should be offered automatically, but again, as I said earlier on, it's not always. Ask for it if it's not offered. Feedback will come in multiple forms, and this is agency and procurement person specific. But what you should expect to get is an understanding of how you scored and where you sat relative to other respondents. You won't get other respondents' names or scores, but you should know, were you significantly low or high? You should get areas of significant strengths or weaknesses, places where you scored well or badly, and the rationale. Hopefully you can get how many other people bid. Were you one of 5? Were you one of 80? But they might not be able to give you the name of the winning bidder, particularly if they're still at presentation stage or if they're in the middle of negotiations. There's no harm in asking. And you should have the opportunity to ask any questions you need to understand how your response was evaluated. Feedback sessions aren't an opportunity to relitigate the scoring process, so please don't use them to point out where they might have missed points or try and argue the result. But if you have a genuine perception that you've been unfairly treated, there is an opportunity to go through a complaint, and that's also on the procurement website that I've linked to previously. We don't have time to get into this now, but it's a very clear outline, so do read through that. In any case, getting feedback is a source of really useful information on how your response was received? Were you as clear as you thought you were? Did your success and your experience come through as well as you thought it did? Gives you areas for improvement in the future, whether you won or whether you lost. So please take advantage. And we've got a few minutes for questions. So really happy to take any questions from people.
Thank you, Jo. I found that very thorough and easy to follow. Yes, like you said, we've got a few minutes for questions. I don't have a question, so hopefully someone may or may not. Anyone?
Hey, Tanya.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation, Joanne. Just wondering, do you have any indications of what the changes are looking like that are being consulted on at the moment?
Yep. So there is a huge amount of changes. There is information. So there is a consultation website up. If you go to the procurement.govt, there's a news link. You can see that. They're streamlining a number of the rules, just make it a bit easier to follow. The big one really is the shift from what previously was called broader outcomes, which was looking at the living wage for certain vulnerable workers, environmental impact, social impact, and that's now shifting to economic benefit, which is a much more of a financial look at how you go. I know this is an area where there has been considerable feedback, so from the people that I've talked with, so it'll be interesting to see how much that stays. But certainly for us, one of the things that we need to look at is, really how are we clear about our benefits. We are New Zealand organisations, we are employing local, we are paying tax in New Zealand, we've not got stuff going offshore. That's a win for us.
Agreed.
But but there are elements which may make it harder as well, and I'll be interested to see how that goes. I talked about they're extending the timeframes for responding. So now it's a blanket, doesn't matter what type of process, minimum of 20 business days with time added on for bad behaviour. So previously it was time off for good behaviour. It's now if they don't give you an advance notice, if they don't make things available electronically, they have to add time. That the amount of time hasn't been defined, and again, that's feedback for hopefully they'll be doing that before it comes out. And there are additional requirements around publishing award notices, which will improve the transparency, particularly around things like those all of government contracts and when there are exemptions and opt-outs. Again, be interesting to see how that plays out after feedback.
Thank you.
We will be emailing this out, and there were quite a few links I noticed, so they will attach the slides, so you'll be able to see those links also.
Yes. So didn't expect people to scribble things down while I was going, because I did whip through some of those early slides quite quickly as well. If you want to get it,
thank you.
Okay. If you want to get in touch with me outside, I am on LinkedIn, and so say I'm in the NZBCA group as well, but please do get in touch with me. I'd love to have a chat with people. Procurement is my passion. I've been in the world for a very, very long time and always love talking about it. Oh, thanks, Sally. Always interested in hearing about your experiences.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, then no more questions, then have a nice day. We'll get that out to you. Thank you very much.
Kia ora. Thank you all.